Hello, I'm Peter Okoche. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. George Floyd's coffin arrives in Houston for a memorial service ahead of his funeral on Tuesday.
Take it down! Take it down!
As anti-racism protests continue in the US and across the world, we take a look at the renewed calls for controversial statues to be removed. South Africa's latest efforts to ease the coronavirus lockdown. Some pupils return to school and places of worship have a limited reopening. The toll taken by distance fishing, how far away countries are sending fleets to harvest waters off the coast of Africa. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. A public viewing is being held today in Houston, Texas for George Floyd, a black man who died after a white policeman knelt on his neck for over 8 minutes during an arrest. The viewing is one of a handful of memorials to honor Mr. Floyd after his death. There have also been widespread protests calling for an end to police brutality. A public viewing took place on Saturday as well, with hundreds turning out to pay their respects to Mr. Floyd in North Carolina, where he was born. He had previously lived in Houston. Well, our correspondent Jane O'Brien is outside the Fountain of Praise Church in southwest Houston. Jane, what's been happening so far there?
Well, we've seen a steady stream of people who, because of social distancing in the pandemic, have been told that they can only go in at 15 people at a time to view the casket containing George Floyd. But they've been coming all morning, and the stories are so personal, and the emotion when they are actually confronted by that casket and the reality of what racism means to so many African Americans in America is overwhelming. Very, very powerful connection for so many people, even those who didn't know him, and the vast majority of people here didn't know him. But they feel that he has now become a symbol of the issue that they've been confronting for 400 years, as one woman put it to me, since the birth of America. Racism has been a problem, and they feel that they've been living by a different set of rules for so long, and now this is a turning point. They really believe that this time it will be different, because they have the support of the white community in America, and they have support of globally. You've seen these protests in cities all around the world, and people here are taking great encouragement from that.
As you say, Jane, emotions running quite deeply there and widespread all over the world. And there's been an extraordinary show of respect by Democrat lawmakers in Washington, D.C. today, as well as Joe Biden, the vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party, meeting with the Floyd family. Has this event, has it taken a political tone over there in the U.S.?
It certainly has. It's exposed once again the deep divisions within America at the moment, the political divide between Republicans and Democrats. And I think that's been starkly evidenced by the polls that show the vast majority of Democrats believe that the policeman who killed George Floyd did so partly because he was black, whereas only 39 of Republicans feel the same way. So there is a political divide and there is a racial divide right now. But what is striking about this is that even though there has been violence at some of these protests, the vast majority of people are protesting peacefully, and it is a multi-ethnic protest that transcends those divides. And there is a real sense, how long it will last, of course, is a different debate, but there is a real sense that right now, America has a chance to unite.
Okay, Jane O'Brien, our correspondent there, just outside the Fountain of Praise Church in southwest Houston. Well, as I mentioned earlier on, the Democratic caucus in the U.S. Congress actually showed an extraordinary amount of respect to George Floyd today, taking the knee there, and especially more poignant for our African viewers, wearing that brightly coloured yellow, green, black and red kente cloth, which originates from Ghana. Now, the first time we saw this in Congress was in 2018, where the Congressional Black Caucus wore this kente cloth during President Trump's State of the Union address in defiance of President Trump calling African and Caribbean countries shitholes. Well, here in Britain, the Home Secretary Priti Patel says justice will follow the thuggery. She was referring to the anti-racist protests across the country over the weekend, some of which descended into clashes with the police. In Bristol, a bronze statue of Edward Colston, a prominent 17th century slave trader, was ripped down by protesters and thrown into the river. Lisa Marie Michtak has more.
A symbolic downfall for a controversial figure. Edward Colston's bronze memorial was removed and dumped into the very docks that saw his ship set sail in the 17th century. The same ships which transported about 80,000 men, women and children from Africa to the Americas. Erected in 1895, Colston's memory has divided the city for years.
I mean, I'm the mixed-race child of a Welsh-English white woman and a black Jamaican father, way back when one of my ancestors would have been taken on a ship from Africa to the Caribbean. That statue is in the front to me, and there's a plaque on it as well that describes him as a wise and virtuous son, so that's a double insult.
Police have launched an investigation to identify protesters who tore down the statue. The Black Lives Matter movement continues to amplify around the world. Activists in Belgium renewed calls for King Leopold II's statue to be removed from Brussels. An estimated 10 million Africans died when Leopold controlled what was then called Congo Free State, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, as his own private colony at the turn of the 20th century. But it's not only the removal of the statue. Many want education to reflect the country's past.
Il faut que les choses changent.
Things have to change, but via people. It's not enough to destroy the statues of Leopold II, even if destroying them is a violent example. But for me, using explanations, understanding, through writing, that is necessary.
In the US, the epicenter of the Black Lives Matter movement, statues of Confederate leaders have also been torn down.
Rhodes must fall! Take it down!
Calls to remove divisive monuments have in recent years become the subject of controversies between those who argue that such monuments merely reflect history and those who say they glorify racism. But there is no doubt the global anti-racism movement has further deepened existing divisions over how to remember these individuals from a painful past. Lisa Marie Michtak, BBC News.
South Africa is currently grappling with the biggest COVID-19 outbreak on the African continent, with over 48,000 confirmed cases. At the same time, it has begun easing lockdown restrictions. Today, pupils were back in school for the first time in nearly 3 months. 95% of schools opened, with the rest to follow by the end of the week. Students must wear face masks at all times. And places of worship, albeit in a limited manner, are also opening. It's a move that's divided opinion across the country's religious community. The BBC's Vumani Mkize sent this report.
Cleanliness is next to godliness. It's a phrase that speaks of spiritual purity and goodness. But in the time of COVID-19, cleanliness could also be a matter of life and death. Places of worship welcomed congregants through their doors this past week, and it seems rigorous health protocols will be just as important as issues of faith.
I'm at the Houghton Mosque here in Johannesburg, and as you can see behind me, the mosque is currently in progress. Well, actually it's just finished, and it was 10 minutes long, and we saw about 50 congregants who are here praying, and this place usually accommodates over 1,000 people.
Besides limiting congregants to 50, places of worship have to thoroughly sanitize their premises and ensure social distancing is observed. Masks are non-negotiable. The easing of restrictions on religious gatherings has polarized society because of how quickly the virus can spread.
There's a very large stigma at the moment around places of worship, and I think we've realized that a lot of that has to do with past circumstances, and we want to change that. We want to keep the places of worship open, but at the same time ensure that they're safe places for the congregants.
The South African Council of Churches still believes churches should be open, but precautions need to be taken.
The priest or whoever is in charge is taking a responsibility and a burden upon themselves, for which they should be very conscious. That you cannot play around with COVID.
At Soweto's Grace Bible Church, the first service in over 2 months provided an opportunity to worshippers to experience the Word of God while observing social distancing. The church concedes not all places of worship are ready to open.
We're not all at the same level of readiness. And I think it's legitimate, because I think church people try to take as much responsibility as possible. But if they don't think they can do it, I still would suggest that people should not do it, because it's not worth risking the lives of people.
For the congregants, getting used to new ways of worshipping will take some time.
It's kind of tricky, because now you normally used to dance with everyone around, but now it's like, hey, keep away. But we're getting used to it. I guess it's life now.
In the Western Cape, the Muslim Judicial Council has advised its mosques to remain closed for at least another month, and many other religious organizations countrywide have also called upon their congregations to stay at home. But for these faithful, it seems not even the coronavirus can keep them away from praise and worship. Vumani Mkize, BBC News, Johannesburg.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwacha. Still to come, what's keeping you busy during the lockdown? Is it gardening, knitting, or maybe even writing a book? We'll hear from you in a minute. I'm Peter Okwacha. Welcome back. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta is threatening the country's constitution by disregarding court orders and refusing to approve the appointment of new judges. That's an accusation made by none other than the country's Chief Justice, David Maraga. According to Justice Maraga, there's a backlog of more than 7,000 cases at the Court of Appeal, which is only 15 judges serving the whole country, and he's laying the blame firmly at the president's feet. Ferdinand Omondi has more.
For the second time in as many weeks, Kenya's Chief Justice is calling out the president on constitutional and legal matters. The Chief Justice wants the president to swear in 41 judges who had been appointed by the Judicial Service Commission without further delay. These appointments were made last year, but the president had refused to swear them in, saying some of the judges had integrity issues. But today, the Chief Justice pointed out that these issues were not raised at the time of the interview, and that 2 courts had already ruled that the president's refusal was unconstitutional. The Chief Justice says that there's a serious backlog of cases, and in some cases, like the appeals court, only a handful are handling thousands of cases, to the extent that if you were to file a case today, it would probably end up in court next year. There is no love lost between the judiciary and the president ever since the Supreme Court of Kenya nullified President Kenyatta's re-election in 2017. At that time, the president called the judiciary crooks and promised to fix them. Ferdinand Omondi, BBC News, Nairobi.
Now, it's World Oceans Day today, and it comes as the global think tank, the Overseas Development Institute, is warning of the risks of distant water fishing. That's the term given to fishing in waters far from a boat or fleet's home country. And it says that African nations are feeling the impact of the practice, which is often unregulated. While many countries are involved in distant water fishing, the ODI research says that China is the largest operator. More than 1,000 of their boats are registered to other countries, most being African countries. With 137 ships, Ghana has registered the largest number of Chinese company ships outside of China. Fishing companies negotiate access to fishing areas, especially in West Africa, and police themselves. Now, let's get more from this with the ODI's research associate Guy Jobbins. He joins me now. Guy, can you explain just why distant water fishing is so harmful to African communities?
Yes, thank you, Peter, and happy World Ocean Day. It matters to Africa because distant water fishing puts African jobs at risk. It takes fish away from African diets, and it contributes to overfishing and ecosystem degradation. So it's really important that Africa gets a fair return from foreign vessels fishing in its waters. So, for example, in a 2016 report, we found that distant water fishing in West Africa brought in around $400 million to national economies. But those nations would have created around $3 billion and 300,000 jobs if they had industrialized their own fishing sectors. And our research implies this issue is bigger than previously recognized.
But I have not heard you mention the fact that this is either legal or illegal. Which is it?
It's not necessarily legal or illegal. Illegal fishing and distant water fishing are quite separate issues, although some distant water fishing is illegal. The illegality comes where distant water fishing vessels are circumventing national regulations. So, for example, many African countries reserve fishing licenses for their own national ships. So registering a ship as being owned by that country and owned by a company from that country could be a loophole so that foreign vessels can purchase fishing licenses, usually reserved for national vessels.
So how can governments make sure that they take advantage of these boats that might be fishing off their coasts?
I think it's a question of negotiating good fishing agreements and increasing transparency, really. And this is the main point, I would argue, of the report. Global fisheries in crisis, and that's a global and a local problem. And it's very difficult to hold bad actors to account. There's no centralized international public database on fishing vessels. So we don't know who is doing what or where. And if a vessel is fishing illegally, if it gets caught, it can simply relocate, rename itself, reflag itself to avoid being taken out of circulation entirely. We need more effective and transparent global data sharing on the fishing sector. We need more effective surveillance and tougher enforcement nationally and internationally. African nations may find that collective action can help address a shared problem, and the African Union's new Blue Economy strategy calls for that collaboration. And I think it's also important that, voice is given to African journalists, fishers organizations, researchers, environmentalists, and others who are trying to shine a light on these issues and hold people to account.
And Guy, until that happens, the people who are suffering this the most immediately are those coastal fishermen, the artisanal fishermen. Is there anything that they can do to ensure that they get their fair share of the fish in these waters?
I think that it's really a challenging issue because fishery licenses are handled by national governments. So, for example, if you look in Ghana, the National Canoe Fishers Council has written an open letter to the government there and has a strong political voice. But at the end of the day, these are sort of matters that are decided at quite senior levels. So I think it's really an issue of opening up transparency and forcing people to be accountable. So anything that can shine light on what is actually happening will hopefully help improve the situation.
Guy, thank you very much for your insight into what is a very important story. Guy Jobbins there from the ODI.
Thank you, Peter.
Now, Zimbabwean boxer Mona Lisa Sibanda clinched the Women's International Boxing Association title in 2019. Her journey into the boxing ring began in response to the death of her mom, a victim of domestic violence. Mona Lisa channeled her grief and anger into training. Here's her story.
Boxing is my life. I eat in boxing. I wear in boxing. All my life is in boxing. My name is Mona Lisa Sibanda, Queen of the Jungle. I'm the first female professional boxer in Zimbabwe. In 1992, the same time I started boxing, that is the same year my mom passed on. The way my mom died, it touched me a lot. I wanted a revenge, and I didn't allow anyone to hit me. I didn't allow any man to hit me because I didn't want to happen to my mom to happen to me. It pushes me to boxing. It pushes me to be a strong woman. I started this boxing at 9. It was all men, only men, especially in our country. In the gyms, there was full of men. It's not easy, but you need to be strong. To show up yourself, we can do it, I can do it. No matter I'm a girl child, no matter I'm a woman, I'm a mother, you can do it. I am a fighter, I am a boxer, but I'm still a woman. When I get into the house, I leave boxing behind. When I'm in the house, I'm a mother. This is the beginning of my achievement. I want to be in the top 5 women world champions. Forgive and forget. There is life after everything. Don't give up your life, yourself, because your parents passed away or your children passed away. Our future is greater than our past. Our tomorrow is better than our today. You need to be strong.
What a brave woman. Now let's take a quick look at what's been keeping you, our audience, busy during the coronavirus lockdown.
During the lockdown, we are staying up late, watching movies together, and for me to keep myself busy, I've been writing a book. I've been using both computers to keep myself busy. And I have been doing a lot of art that my parents are going to keep to make a coloring book. We enjoy playing with our baby brother too. Besides doing our homework, we also enjoy playing with the baby brother and staying with our family at home. We hope that lockdown ends soon and the world gets back to normal. Stay safe and stay home.
It's the same old message, the coronavirus message. And we all know we can prevent it by washing your hands regularly with soap or using hand sanitizers. Keeping a social distance, like 1 meter or plus.
It is a beautiful weather today, and lockdown has inspired me in many ways. Book writing, painting, soap baking, and also crochet design, such as this beautiful poncho I've just done with the matching mask. It has a double protective layer, and this is what has been keeping me busy all these days.
Due to this pandemic, we are practicing bag culture, whereby vegetables are being planted in bags. And today, with the help of my brother and my sister, we are continuing with the project in order to reduce movement of outsourcing vegetables elsewhere. Africa, practice bag culture. Stay home, stay safe. COVID-19 is real.
I mean, what brilliant timing, eh? Now, some countries have started easing the lockdown restrictions, and if your country has, we want to hear from you. What is the one thing you did or look forward to doing once measures eventually begin to be lifted? Send us your video clip. Our WhatsApp number is +44 7521 665106. That's +44 7521 665106. And remember to record in landscape with your phone on its side. A reminder that that WhatsApp number is +44 7521 665106. Let's return to our top story now. I'm bringing the latest from Houston there, where a public viewing is being held for George Floyd. Remember, a black man who died after a white policeman knelt on his neck for 8 minutes during an arrest. It's one of a handful of memorials to honor Mr. Floyd after his death. Now, don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on social media. I'm at Okwoche. But for now, that's it from Focus on Africa. From me, Peter Okwoche, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching. See you again very soon. Bye.